I'm here at the North Carolina Museum of Natural History to interview Eric Lund, and I'm just excited to have this opportunity. Hey guys, welcome back to the Prehistoric Life podcast. I'm your host, Eric Crawford, and today we're here with the first in-person interview. Would you like to introduce yourself?
I'm Eric Lund. I'm the SCCU Dino Lab Manager here at the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences.
It's so nice to meet you in person. I'm just so excited to have a first official in-person interview. So let's just start off with the basic question I start every interview off with. What is your favorite dinosaur?
So I think for a lot of paleos this is a hard question, but for me it's an easy question. So my favorite dinosaur is Nasutoceratops. The reason it is my favorite is I found the holotype specimen. So I found the original one, the material that became known as Nasutoceratops. It also became the basis for my master's thesis, which in that I named it Nasutoceratops, but the formal publication didn't come out until 2013. So that is why it is my favorite. So Nasutoceratops is a ceratopsian horned dinosaur. It's related to Triceratops, but predates Triceratops by 10 million years.
So, I mean, how did you come across that? What was that experience like, coming across a completely new species?
Yeah, so the way this went down is it was at the end of probably one of the longest days of my life, working in Grand Staircase, Escalante National Monument, doing survey work in the Kaparowitz Formation. And I had hiked, meandered my way through the formation. I was probably 10 miles from camp and had a very terrible day in not finding hardly any fossils worthwhile. The sun was setting and I decided to go up one more hill, and as I went up this small slope I started finding large chunks of bone. So I kept chasing it up, and there was more and more and more till it got to sort of a small nose, a little bit of a flat spot, and there was just a bunch of bone there. So I just started, first I think I screamed. I was like really excited, finally found some bone for the day. And so then I just kind of collected myself and started sweeping down the whole area and started finding pieces that I knew related to a horned dinosaur. So it had the characteristic ceratopsian texture, so I knew it was a horned dinosaur. Didn't really know how much was there yet, but I basically vacuumed up the entire surface. Like I said, the sun was setting, so I put all that stuff in a bag, loaded in my backpack, and then started the 10-mile or so hike back to camp. When I got to camp, everybody asked me how my day was, and I was like, let me show you. And I got these bags out and we started talking about it. So at that time, didn't know it was new. It wasn't until we really excavated it, collected it, got it back to the museum where I started the preparation work on it. And soon after getting these jackets open and starting to process it and work through it, that's when I realized that it had characteristics that I had not seen before in any other horned dinosaur. So once we got it all prepared, and then that's when Dr. Scott Sampson, who became my master's thesis advisor, was like, hey, would you like to write this up for your master's? And of course you'd jump at that opportunity. So it wasn't until I really started to go through that process that we realized it was something new.
So paleontology is a field that is actually kind of blowing up right now. We're in the golden age of paleontology, thanks to a lot of different things like Walking with Dinosaurs, Jurassic Park, /World, and just the popularity of the dinosaurs in general, like the bone wars, things like that. How did you get into paleontology? What drove you to be here?
So I think I had one of those sort of Cinderella stories where at the age of 3, my grandparents took me to Dinosaur National Monument. And there was something about that environment, the setting. Way back then, they were still working on the wall. And I saw people there. They had a very, very small preparation space. There were people working in there. And something in three-year-old Eric said, that's what I want to do. And so I sort of never lost that vision. When I got to university, I hit straight out in majoring in geology, so I did the more traditional route. Majored in geology, and I have been fortunate enough that my trajectory through this career has allowed me to stay in it, and has taken me to many different places, being part of teams that have named several new species of dinosaur, but that's how I got into it. It's when I was 3 years old.
You just love the game from the beginning.
Absolutely, yeah.
That's honestly, I relate to that. But I mean, recently the new Walking with Dinosaurs came out.
It did.
And of course I watched it. Spoilers if you haven't started watching it. But the first episode, you're in it. You're the head paleontologist guy in it.
I am.
There was a theory that was mentioned, I don't remember off the top of my head if it was your theory or somebody else's theory, that Triceratops had blood vessels in its frill so that it could change the color of its frill, kind of like some people say that Stegosaurus can do with its plates. Could you elaborate on that or explain how you found that, why you think that? Or
Yeah, so this has been, it's not my hypothesis, it's been a hypothesis that's been around for quite some time, but it stems from the fact that if you look at the surface texture of the bones that make up a ceratopsian's frill, that big, that we'll call it a shield, it's not really a shield, that big expansion of the back of the skull, it is just chock full of vascular channels, pits and grooves that go in and out of the bone. And so what that tells us is that entire surface was covered in a wide network of veins and blood vessels. And so people started to wonder what that was for. So several hypotheses. One is that, as you saw in Walking with Dinosaurs, that it was a way for Triceratops to make itself more scary, if that could be a thing. So you're already an animal that's 20 feet long, you have a head approaching 7 feet, you have these giant massive horns on the front of your face, but you also, if waving your head around isn't enough, then you have potentially this ability to take blood and shunt it up into that area and maybe change colors. In the show, they manifest as eye spots, but it could just be like some coloration that streams across there, which might be enough of a distraction for, say, the Triceratops to get away, or to, if it did use its horns in a battle manner, maybe to hit, the attacker. So that's just one hypothesis. Another hypothesis is that it's for thermoregulation. So again, you're a huge animal, you live in the Cretaceous hothouse environment. Just because you're so big, you're having trouble losing body heat. So why don't you evolve a radiator in your body? So again, take all that hot blood, shunt it up into what is a very thin feature of the skull, and then shed body heat that way, and then bring that more cooled blood, that now cooled blood, back into the body, and just help thermoregulate yourself. So that's where that comes from, is just by looking at the bones, because that's what we have, right? We don't have any of the soft tissues. None of those vessels are still there. None of the skin is still there, but we have the bones, and so we try to glean as much information from those bones as possible.
And obviously it's kind of hard to get official answers or anything in the field because you don't have lab equipment out there that that has to stay in a building, or it's just too big to carry around. But what is it like excavating the bones? What can you tell just right off the bat versus what's like in the lab?
Yeah, so some of the things in the field, right, we collect as much data as possible. So we're not just out there looking at the bones. We're trying to collect sediment samples. We're looking at the geology below the quarry, at the quarry, and above the quarry. Trying to piece together the depositional environment. I'm a vertebrate paleontologist who studies dinosaurs, but dinosaurs are one small portion of the whole ecology of the system. So we're also looking for any other fossils that could tell us something. So maybe a particular plant species is preserved in a particular quarry, and that might tell us something about the environment, the temperature, the water quality, something like that. We look for other animals, turtles, fish, crocodiles, birds, any other fossils that are in and around this assemblage that might tell us something. And so it's really drawing upon all these pieces of information to try to reconstruct as close of a complete picture as possible.
And then you get all the fossils, you get all the geology, you bring it to the lab. What is the lab preparation system?
Yep, so we do very little out in the field, as little as possible, because we want everything to be controlled. So back in the lab, that's really where a lot of the exposing of the bone happens. So cut open those field jackets, and then start to carefully go down through the matrix or the rock that surrounds that bone. But we're employing some of the same techniques. We're still looking for other fossils that might be there, trying to read the rocks. As we're uncovering the bones, we're trying to look for any signs of maybe predation or mechanical wear in that bones. Were these bones transported a distance? Were these bones eaten? So anything that we can glean, grab onto as far as data that we can put together to try to tell the whole story. So in the lab, cut open those jackets using small brushes, small dental picks, pin vices with carbide needles. Sometimes, it's millimeters a day that we're taking down the sediment, going just really slowly, trying to keep everything together, taking ample notes and pictures. So really, the lab work can be even more tedious than collecting things out in the field.
Because I assume out in the field it's a little more, at least starting out, you're just breaking a lot of surface out of the way.
Yeah, just trying to get that overburden out of the way, trying to formulate the size of your blocks, trying to get things down to small enough things that you can actually carry it out. Because in many cases, we're not allowed to use anything with wheels. And so we got to carry it in, we got to carry it out. And so if you make your block too big, then you can't carry it out. So what are you going to do? Well, if things are really large, then you got to hire a helicopter to fly it out.
It's expensive.
It's expensive. Sometimes you can't get the funds to do that. Sometimes there's not. If you're in fire season in the western United States, you're gonna have a hard time finding a bird that's going to be able to deviate from doing fire duty to help you collect a dinosaur. And so it can be a lot. So you try to make things as small as possible. If it's a couple 100 pounds, you can either put it on an EMT stretcher board and team carry it out, or you can. I've seen teams. I've been part of teams where you've put stuff on old car hoods and drug stuff out that way. Can use horses, but again, horses need water and a whole bunch of infrastructure to get all that stuff going. So really, if you can throw it in a backpack, that's the best.
And of course, the smaller the better. So is it ever an answer to kind of like individual parts? Is that a possibility, or is that usually?
It depends on, it depends on how the bones are laid out. Sometimes it really is a game of pickup sticks, where you have an assemblage of bones just laid on top of each other all over the place. Other times you have nice separation between elements. And so if you can separate stuff, take it as small a jackets as possible. But sometimes it's just not feasible to separate stuff, and so you require to take a larger jacket.
And I mean, what is the biggest thing that you've had to deal with versus like the smallest thing?
So smallest thing, right? Tiny bird bones working in Madagascar. We were taking out, golf ball sized jackets, individual little bird bones in these tiny jackets, which you can, fill your pockets up with these little things, right? So it's great. You can just walk them out. But some of the larger jackets that I've had to deal with, we collected a nearly complete Triceratops skull. The jacket was 7.5 feet long by maybe 6 feet wide, weighed 5,000 pounds. There was no way we were going to carry that out. So we did indeed have to get a helicopter. So we flipped it over into a helicopter net and we flew it out to a trailer, nearby trailer, and then drove it back to North Carolina. But that was one of the largest things that I've collected was that trike skull. So the building we're in now, this is our newer building. Our older, we call it the old building.
The old building.
Is there other one? So the other one came first. It was built in 2012, maybe. Could be wrong about that. But yeah, so this is our original prep space.
That's
it's probably the one you've seen before, being here. But it functioned well as a prep space for quite some time. But just not equipped to work on really big things. It was quite a feat to get that Triceratops skull into this lab. One, right, because we got to come up the freight elevator and across these bridges.
Oh, yeah.
And so that's the skull I was mentioning that we collected. That was
a big skull.
When we first collected it was 5,000 pounds. It's weight, I've removed so much rock from there since. But it's still probably a couple thousand pounds. We had to have a structural engineer tell us that we could wheel it across these bridges to actually get it in here. So that was quite fun.
I'm guessing having a prep lab on there, or a lab on the first floor, is a lot more convenient.
So much better. We don't have to worry about coming up elevators, coming across bridges, right? And the newest lab, we have outside access. So the whole front wall of the museum is an accordion door. So I can pull the field trailer up right to the front of the museum, boom lift stuff just through that threshold, and then pick stuff up with the crane that's in the lab.
That's got to be
and
really
so
useful.
it's so much better. It's just so much better. Yeah.
And again, deviating back to the Walking the Dinosaurs, there was a drone technology where you scan the ground.
Yep.
Could you expand on that a little more?
Yeah, so this is a methodology where we rely on technology, and specifically we're relying on a technique called laser stimulated fluorescence. And the idea behind this is the bones have been fossilized with minerals. Some of those minerals are going to fluoresce, and fluorescence is when you shine a high intensity light at something. Those minerals absorb some of that light, and then they give that light back off. Going to be at a slightly different wavelength than you put that light in, but that light's going to come back at you, which you can capture through still photography. So the idea is attach a camera and a laser to that drone, and then you open the shutter on that camera and you fly that drone with the laser on across the ground. And so laser's going down, it's being absorbed by the stuff on the ground, being given back off. That camera's picking that light back up. And so once you get the drone back to you, download all those images, and you can stack together that sequence of images into hopefully a picture of the ground where you can see these bright spots. And those bright spots are things that have fluoresced. And so in the show, we flew that drone out, scanning the ground, and it was in the Hell Creek. When you're working in the Hell Creek, it's hard to walk anywhere without finding some piece of bone. So you could see a lot of little things in the images that were created from this drone flight. But we're looking for big stuff that really is bright. And people can watch the show and see that we did indeed find a really large bone through this technique. But that's the idea. Because otherwise, we got to do it old school way. Boots on the ground, eyes open, staring at the ground, looking for fossils, right? Trying to find fossils coming out. But if you can maybe do that from the comfort of camp, fly that drone out, scan for new areas, bring that drone back, post-process those images, and find some new places that you can go look that you might not have thought about before. Because you can kind of get a little insular as you're out there, right? You can only walk so far in a day. And so being able to sort of figure out different places you can go look is kind of the impetus for trying to find a way to do it a little bit easier.
So you've mentioned Western America, Hell Creek Formation, and I'm blanking on what you said, where you found the Nasutoceratops. You've also talked about Madagascar. Where all have you done fossil excavations?
Yeah, so mostly in North America. So all over the western United States, Colorado, Wyoming, Montana, Utah, New Mexico, down into Mexico, and then over in Africa. So Kenya, Malawi, Tanzania, Madagascar. And then our group, I hope to go at some point, just the group here at North Carolina just started a project over in Mongolia, which I would love to get over there and check out some of those rocks. But yeah, so mostly Western United States, a little bit in Africa, are all the places I've been.
Could you expand on some of the species and different geological structures that you come across in those areas and how they differ based on like what the process is for excavation?
Yeah, so the process for excavation is going to be the same across the board. Taking stuff out in fossil jackets, mapping quarries, GPSing sites, so all that's going to be the same. But we find different animals at these different time periods. So the animals we find here in North America are different than those we find in Africa. So we have that Laurasia-Gondwana split. And so way back, mid-Cretaceous, two land masses. We had Southern Hemisphere, we got Gondwana, and Northern Hemisphere, we got Laurasia, and those animals are different. They're similar types. We still have meat-eating dinosaurs in both places, but totally different types of animals in each place. So the Tyrannosaurs we find here in the Hell Creek are different than the meat-eating dinosaurs we're finding over in Africa. In Africa, we have Abelisaurids. Like in Madagascar, we have Majungasaurus. In Tanzania, we have just glimpses of this large theropod. Don't have enough yet to figure out what it is. Got to keep going back to try to figure that out. And then here in the Hell Creek, we have world-famous T-Rex. And so totally different sort of biotas in each place.
So I mean, that's obviously just ecosystem-wise. So obviously you mentioned Dinosaur National Monument was what kind of got you into paleontology. What was your journey like getting to your position where you are now?
Yeah, so like I said, wanted to do this since I was 3. When I got to university, hit the ground running, did a traditional route through geology. During my undergrad, I became a volunteer at my local museum, which was the Natural History Museum of Utah. So at the time when I started there, the museum was still on bottom campus in the old library. And so became a volunteer, got exposed to being able to work on fossils, which then I got involved in going out in the field. And that sort of spun into my master's degree, and then being offered the job to manage the lab there and manage the field. So then from there, decided that I should continue schooling. So I uprooted from Salt Lake, moved myself to Ohio, started a degree there in biology, and then came here to North Carolina to oversee the the processes around the Dueling Dinosaurs project and the preparation of those specimens here at the museum.
Could you expand on the Dueling Dinosaurs process, what your role has been and how it's going?
Yeah, so for those that don't know, the Dueling Dinosaurs are two specimens collected from the Hill Creek Formation in Montana, which now are here at the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences. They are permanently here as part of our permanent research collection, but we have two specimens found together, entombed 67 million years ago in the same package of rocks. We have a Tyrannosaur and we have a Triceratops. We did not find them or excavate them. We just have the pleasure now to work on them. And so a little over a year ago now, April 2024 is when our group started working on these specimens, continuing the preparation of them and doing a lot of the novel study of these animals, trying to figure out if indeed they were dueling. How did these two iconic animals, a Tyrannosaur and a Triceratops, end up almost entwined, touching each other in the same package of rocks? Right now we have few answers. We have more questions than we do answers. One of the things we do know is that the depositional event that buried these two animals was one single event, and it was quite an event. We have somewhere around 20 feet of overburden, fluvial derived sands, so river sands, that buried these animals. So one of the hypotheses is that this was a big debris flow or flood, but whether or not one animal was already dead, one came to feed and they got buried, or they were both dead and they got pushed into the same spot, or they weren't interacting at all and they got sort of dragged in from farther away. We're not quite sure, or they could have been dueling. In fact, you have a predator and a prey species, and they were fighting it out, and something happened, and they got buried together. So we're trying to figure that out. It's pretty exciting. We've built an entire new lab space, currently all around the Dueling Dinosaurs fossils, but it is going to be our permanent lab space where we're going to be working on other fossils we bring in from the field. But yeah, that's the Dueling Dinosaurs. So that whole front wall there, you can see the door there that opens up. But yeah, currently, space is taken up by the Dueling Dinosaurs. Triceratops sort of in front of us here, Tyrannosaur on that side. But able to build this lab from the ground up, put most infrastructure in here that allows us to safely and more easily work on really large things. So one of the things I really like is this 10-ton overhead crane.
It seems very useful.
So being able to just move these large things around safely is really quite a feat. So that piece of equipment comes in handy so much, which is really great.
And I'm guessing instead of getting like 40 people to come have to move it, you can just kind of one or two people to just hook it up properly.
So earlier this year, had everyone who works in here with me, I had them all trained up on rigging. So how to rig up really heavy loads and understand the dynamics of how you can suspend something in air from a crane and do it safely. So that's really, really great. So beyond like the fossil prep stuff, right? We get everybody trained up in here on how to do the crane work and how to use power tools and stuff. So
because that's a very unique thing for this lab.
Yep. So it's pretty great. And then the big blue tubes, right? Dust is really bad for you.
Yeah.
So
you don't want to breathe that in.
These things are on 24 hours a day, just scrubbing the air. So again, being one of the only fossil prep spaces, if not the only fossil prep space that lets visitors come inside on a regular basis, we want to keep everybody safe, everybody having an enjoyable time, and so just clean the air, keep us all safe. So yeah, pretty great.
It also makes you not have to wear a mask. And
yeah, I mean, generally just being in here, we don't have to wear a mask. But still, if we're doing some heavy cutting on these jackets,
I would imagine
we will all mask up. But yep, just want to be as safe as possible.
And when you do heavy cutting, do you close it down or do you?
Yeah, so prior to Labor Day, we were open only 6 days a week. Mondays, museum was open to staff but closed to the public. Those were the days that we did our dirty work. Now that we're open 7 days a week, we can do after hours stuff. Or if at my discretion I have something that I need to get done, I can tell museum administration that I have to close the lab, and they'll let me close it down for a period, and so we can just keep the public safe, keep all of us safe without any distractions. So,
because I assume while you're cutting, dust goes everywhere, and you just
don't want. Yeah. So we can just open up these air ducts and get people again with vacuums right up to where we're cutting, and just try to maintain that as much as possible. But
yeah, it's quite the operation you got.
Yeah.
For those who don't know, we did interview Clayton Phipps. Go check out that episode. He does talk about it. But of course, I mean, just traveling the world and excavating dinosaurs is a dream of most paleontologists, and you've been able to live that. Outside of finding the Pseudoceratops, what has been one of the most exciting fossil excavation adventures you've been on?
Oh, they're all really exciting because they're all a little bit different, right? The work is kind of the same, but one of the things I like the most about this job is the adventure and discovery. To be out in a place, doesn't matter where it is, looking for fossils is truly magical. Being able to discover something that no other person has seen ever is amazing. If the fossils you find turn out to be something new, even more amazing. But yeah, that's one of my favorite things is just discovery and being able to go to different places and find these things is pretty great.
What is your position in like the lab environment? What do? You get the fossils, you bring them back. What is it that you do? What is it that your team does in the lab? So
my title is the SECU Dino Lab Manager. So SECU is State Employees Credit Union here in North Carolina. They gave us some monetary funds to help build the new lab space. That's why it's called that. That's why my title is that. But I am the lab manager of our largest fossil prep lab here at the museum. So I oversee all the practical operations that go in there. So make sure the fossils are being taken care of properly, prepared properly. So I wear many hats in that job. Right now we have a bunch of summer interns, so it's training them, so passing on my knowledge of how to prepare fossils, how to work with the different materials that we work with in the lab. But I also do a lot of public engagement. So the way the lab is set up here at the museum is we're an open lab concept, which means that people get to come inside the lab and watch us work and talk to us directly. To my knowledge, we're the only fossil prep space that allows people to come inside on a regular basis, not just special opportunities. Otherwise, other fossil prep spaces around the world are built as a fishbowl. The visitors on the other side of the glass, wondering what's going on inside. Well, here they get to come inside and actually ask what's going on in this space. So do a lot of talking to the public, a lot of education, and so wear many hats.
So you're the public face of that section at least.
Yep. That's
got to be exciting, nerve-wracking, and I'm sure exhausting.
It is at times, but it's all great. Yep, right. Trying to inspire the next set of not just paleontologists but scientists.
And it's just kind of I just keep figuring stuff out about you. Like apparently you discovered Nasutoceratops. I literally just learned that. You also mentioned that you've been part of teams that have discovered other species. Can you elaborate on some of those species?
Yeah, so my research specialty is horned dinosaurs, so I've been a part of teams that have named all horned dinosaurs. So 2 other species that I helped named was Coelaceratops magnicorna from the Cerro del Pueblo Formation in northern Mexico. And then Machairoceratops, which is another horned dinosaur from Utah, but older than Nasuto by about 5 million years, occurs in the Wahweap Formation. And so I was lead author on that paper. But yeah, so 3 dinosaurs over my career so far: Nasutoceratops, Machairoceratops, and Coelaceratops.
So, horned dinosaur specialist, what got you into that? Why did you focus on that?
Yeah, it really was finding Nasutoceratops sort of sent me down that pathway. When I was doing my undergrad and doing an undergrad thesis, I wrote it on duckbill dinosaurs. I thought that's what I was going to study, was duckbills. But then finding Nasuto really just opened that door, and doing the research on that group, I fell in love with it, and it's become my favorite.
And taxonomy is always a hassle to discuss because it's always just kind of a guess.
Yep.
Most of the time, because we really can't properly link anything most of the time. Can you elaborate on how some of them just spread out and why they might be like they are?
Yeah, well, the real answer to that question is we don't know, like you just said. We can only make our best guesses. And so the animals that I just talked about, Nasutoceratops, Machairoceratops, and Coelaceratops. So those 3 animals, 2 of which, Nasutoceratops and Machairoceratops, are in the subfamily Centrosaurines. And then Coelaceratops is a Chasmosaurine, so the other subfamily. And there are things about their anatomy that distinguishes these 2 groups from each other, but they're all horned dinosaurs. So there was a time where it seemed like there were these northern and southern here in the United States, these northern and southern centers of endemism, where we get these centers of evolution where these things are doing crazy things in each spot. As there have been some more recent studies that have started to call into question that hypothesis, where there might be more of a mixing happening, or it could be that we've got the whole tree is just rife with homoplasy, which is similar shapes but no shared linkage between those. And so it's really just going to take more people working on these things to try to figure this out. And the true answer, we might never know, right? We're just going to be dealing with hypotheses and sort of jumping from idea to idea, which is fine. That's how science works.
It's like you mentioned with homeoplasies, like even Triceratops, there's 2 different species, Hortus and Proris, and it's kind of, they're both Triceratops, but yet they're still different. So
yep.
Why is that?
Yeah, so that's apparently a separation stratigraphically, so over time. So at the very bottom of the formation is where we get Hortus, and then as we go through time, there at some point in the middle Hell Creek there's a change, and at the very top, right before the KPG boundary, right before that final hurrah of dinosaurs, we get Proris. And so some have hypothesized that this is an anagenetic change, where it's sort of a linear change, gradual change over time, whole bunch of evolutionary changes stack up, and we go from Hortus to Proris, as opposed to a cladogenic sort of change where we get a branch, right? So along the way, you got one form that evolves, and then branches off, you get another form. Some of those branches are going to die and fall off, and sort of a main branch is going to continue. And so we're not really finding a whole lot of intermediates in this formation. And so, you know, it's kind of strange. What kind of evolutionary pathway do we have here? Is it more anagenic? But so far there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of support for that. Is it cladogenic? Maybe. It's just, yeah, it might be a question we never really get to the answer of.
Taxonomy is so much fun. I've done a project where I've just made a dinosaur taxonomical tree. It's a nightmare.
It is, yeah.
It's update it every other day. It's just new stuff, change stuff,
yep.
New theory.
Right, and most of the things that we're looking at, we're coding characters, but one character that someone sees in one set of fossils, another person looks at that same fossil and doesn't see that character at all. And so you get all of these matrices that either agree or don't agree, and they're all running these, you know, giving us these hypotheses which may be correct, may not be correct. Just need for people to understand that, you know, they are just a hypothesis. It's not the true answer.
It's because, I mean, we're still arguing if Tyrannosaurus is a predator or a scavenger.
Right, yeah. Yep.
I mean, what is your take on that? What do you...
You know, T-Rex is a huge animal. Its head is 3-4 feet long. It's a 40-foot long animal. It's giant. It's got these massive teeth. T-Rex is going to eat what T-Rex wants to eat. I'm sure if there was a trach carcass or a hadrosaur carcass laying there and it was hungry, it's gonna go for it. But it could probably, you know, could also hunt. We just don't really know, right? So drawing upon the bones that we have, the things we can glean from you know, its anatomy to try to make the best guesses we can. So it didn't really answer your question, but I think T-Rex was probably an opportunist. If there's a carcass, it's going to take it. If it needed to hunt, it could do that. And
I mean, it's the best answer.
Yes, exactly.
And as a ceratopsian specialist, as a horned dinosaur specialist, you could probably go into better detail on this than I can. So the depiction of like Triceratops defense circles, where there's like hundreds, not hundreds, but large masses of them. For Triceratops specifically, it's not necessarily an idea right now because of how solitary they're found. Could you go into detail on that versus other species where that might be a thing?
Yeah, so for Triceratops, we tend to just find individual specimens. They seem to be isolated, or there might be at most 2 individuals in a spot. This is opposed to, say, a Pachyrhinosaur or a Centrosaurus, where we have multi-ontogenetic bone beds, so animals of different age ranges all in a huge assemblage together. And so maybe that points more towards, so Pachyrhinosaur and Centrosaur are both Centrosaurians, so maybe that points to that Centrosaurians were more social, more gregarious, whereas maybe Chasmosaurians were not so much, right? Hanging out, lone wolves hanging out in their environment. But yeah, we just don't know.
I mean, that's just always something I've found in, like, that distinction that even within paleo art depiction, they always show Triceratops in these big groups, but like the fossil record doesn't support that.
Right, doesn't support it. But, you know, us as humans, we like to put emotions on things, and so being able to draw the battle or, you know, draw the fight, you know, looking at modern animals, looking at what bison do, looking at what cows do, and how young are protected in these other groups. You want to put sort of those emotions and behaviors into these animals, because that's the way that you connect to the world. And we're now dealing with a world that we've never seen. We've got little glimpses of these things, and we're trying to make the best picture we can. And so, that's what we got. So that's what we got to do.
And branching off that, of course, the Triceratops horns are a famous staple of the dinosaur. It's where it gets its name from. But what we find is the bony core of it.
Mm-hmm.
Like the theory of a keratin sheath is there, or something that is more to the horn. Can you elaborate on that? Talk about why that might be a thing, why people think that, or if there's any actual evidence for that or not?
Yeah, so to my knowledge, there's been no keratin sheath preserved in the fossil record associated with any of these horns. But what leads us to think that is, again, drawing on modern animals. So looking at animals that have horns with keratin sheaths. So looking at your cows, they have a bony horn core and a keratin sheath over that. And if you take the keratin sheath off, that bony surface has vascular channels on it that would have supported, one, the bone, and two, supported that keratin sheath. If we now look at ceratopsian horns, which in life would have been bone, the surface of that is covered in these vascular channels. So that's what's led people to hypothesize that those features supported the keratin sheath. And it sort of makes sense, right? We can look at a few theropods, meat-eating dinosaurs, where they have an ungule, so a claw, where the keratin sheath is preserved in the fossil record. And so we know that there was keratin there. We look at the surface of that bone, it's got vascular channels to help support that keratin. So it makes sense. Seems to be a very plausible thing that these features would have supported such a thing.
And I mean, also it's just an interesting depiction because it just makes the horn bigger.
Yeah. Yeah. And you looking at modern animals, there's no animal walking around with just a bone sticking out their head, right?
Absolutely.
So you also got to go with the most parsimonious answer, which is like, we don't see it now, probably didn't happen then. And we know that modern crocodiles and birds are the only living relatives of dinosaurs today. There's none of them that have just random bones sticking out of their body. And we look at bird bills, right? Bony bird bill covered in a keratin sheath, right? So just makes sense.
And that's actually, even Triceratops has a surprisingly strong bite force from prediction and calculation. Because, can you elaborate on that too?
Yeah, so it seemed like, one, horned dinosaurs like Triceratops had one of the most derived chewing apparatuses of any group of dinosaurs. Hadrosaurs are complementary to that. What I mean by the most derived chewing apparatus is they take their teeth and they pack them tightly together, creating a solid chewing surface, a occlusal surface. Both top and bottom jaws have this. And they replace their teeth throughout their life. So ceratopsians had sharing dentition, which we don't think of plant eaters as having teeth like scissors, but their teeth came together like scissors to process all the plant material that they're dealing with. If you look at the bones and the space where the muscles would have attached, there's lots of space in there for big muscles. To have a really strong muscle, you don't make that muscle longer, you just increase its cross-sectional area. You add more of those muscle fibers in there. And there seems to be lots of space in a horned dinosaur head for big chewing muscles. Then if you look at the lower jaw, where those muscles are attaching, it's got a giant lever on it. So huge spot to be cranking on, these muscles to be cranking on to be closing these big jaws. And they're probably eating really poor quality, terrible food, really tough, fibrous food. And so they need powerful bite to be able to nip at this low quality food and chomp on it and get sustenance out of it.
And what would be the evolutionary reasoning for having like a beak instead of a bill or something else?
So that beak, again, hypothesized to be covered in a keratin sheath, just like modern bird. It's edentulous, has no teeth, but it does have a triturating surface, meaning it has a surface where the upper and lower beak come together to crop. So probably used to crop vegetation, and then the tongue bring that food back in the mouth. Beyond that, don't really know what else it could be used for. In some species, like Chasmosaurus, it's really quite recurved on the front, so potentially used to dig a little bit, but we don't know.
I mean, we're the one science that will say that, because we genuinely just will not know.
Yep.
Because it's building a 1,000-piece puzzle but missing 2/3 of the pieces.
Right.
And I mean, Triceratops is the most famous of the ceratopsian species, and that tree explodes out from even, I don't want to call them theropods because they're not theropods, but two-legged little, something like Pincinatosaurus. Can you talk about the evolutionary, I don't want to say jump, but like what would be the need or the reasoning behind them going from tiny two-legged Pincinatosaurus to the massive Goliath Triceratops?
Yeah, well, again, we don't know, but you're right. This is a group that existed for around 97 million years. Very first animals that can be categorized as ceratopsians evolved in the late Jurassic. The earliest known ceratopsian is an animal called yinlong. It's from China. Small-bodied animal, maybe the size of a German Shepherd, walked on two legs. Didn't really have the expansion of the back of that skull just yet, but it does have that iconic beak on the front. And so we go from that to an animal at the end of the Cretaceous, again, that is one of the largest terrestrial herbivores to ever live, got a head nearing 7 feet long. So one of the functional hypotheses as to why you go from such a small animal to such a large animal. One, evolution is taking you in a trajectory where you're doing several things, right? You're just getting big overall. You're expanding the back of that skull. You're increasing your food processing power with those dental batteries. But then the front of your face is also getting really large. And so one of the things hypothesized is that you're just getting big overall. You're having a hard time losing body heat, so you create a way to thermoregulate better. Get a big old nose, fill it full of epithelial tissues that's allowing you to either hold on to moisture or get rid of moisture and heat more easily living in these environments. So one of the things that I've been thinking about it for the reason for this is just finding a way to live and thermoregulate your body and keep your brain cool.
And even the other half of that tree, where it's not the ceratopsians but the Pachycephalosaurs, I mean, that's even, they just kind of stayed, they're not small, but they're smaller than most ceratopsians.
Yeah, so those two groups of animals, the Pachycephalosaurs and the ceratopsians, are united in a group called marginocephalia, which is a big word that just means margin of bone around the skull. And so if we look at Pachycephalosaurs, there's a margin of bone around the skull, and then the frill and ceratopsians is the margin of bone around the skull. But yeah, doing, you know, two groups united by this particular feature, but then, you know, one gets really huge and the other one stays relatively small, although Pachycephalosaurus is pretty big. But, you know, Pachycephalosaurs are still quite an enigmatic group. We don't know a lot about them.
Very few, very sparse.
Very few specimens of this, but super cool animals nonetheless.
And I mean, even outside of Pachycephalosaurus, there's even debate with Stygimoloch if it's a Pachycephalosaur and it's just a different species or whatever. But like, I think we were saying they stayed relatively small.
Right.
Small on dinosaur standard, big for compared to a human. But what would be, because they were around roughly the same time, Pachycephalosaurus and Triceratops, I'm just using the famous ones from that group. They were around similar location-ish, same-ish time, give or take a few million years, but why would those, is there a possibility for them to, like, maybe not Triceratops, but like exist together, work together?
I'm not sure working together, but certainly hanging out in the same environments. But looking at, you know, the dentition in each one of these groups, they're completely different. Even though they're both herbivorous, eating plants, doesn't seem like they would have been eating the same thing. So maybe in the same environment, but you know, ecologically doing different things.
Very much so. Because, I mean, I've had my own personal theory, but like whales occasionally with divers and sharks, they'll save the diver because of whatever instinct. Is that a thing in other species like dinosaurs where some kind of maternal instinct or something in like in Walking Dinosaurs, a hadrosaur causes it to protect the baby Triceratops or something along those lines?
I mean, it's potential, right? It's all, we don't know, but we see it in modern animals. And so again, it's one of those things where you as a scientist are trying to piece together a puzzle that we may not have, well, we certainly don't have all the pieces to the puzzle yet. We may not ever get them. We don't even have a picture on the box to make sure that we're putting the pieces we do have in the right place. And so we're just drawing from anything we can put a possibility on and trying to make an answer.
And I mean, obviously, the dueling dinos is a very special thing because that shows that maybe a clash, but that tyrannosaurs and ceratopsians lived in the same environment.
Certainly,
it's depicting that famous conflict between them.
Yeah, certainly living in the same area. We're in the same area when whatever happened. If they were fighting, you know, could have been, also could have not have been. But.
Yeah, it's always, that's the question with it that you're trying to figure out. What would be the evidence that you would look for conflict versus natural disaster versus just KT extinction?
Yeah, so some of the things, teeth embedded in the skeleton of, you know, from the meat eater to the plant eater. And not only that, teeth that we can definitively link to the meat eater, right? So looking for that, looking for signs of predation that we can contribute to that animal, seeing if the rocks around these fossils can lead us to figure out what the interaction was between them. So really, you just got to collect as much data as possible to try to figure it out. But you know, those are some of the things that we're looking at.
What would because you're talking about like the teeth and things being found in the dinosaur, what would that look like? What would you see on the actual fossil to like indicate that?
Yeah, well, right, all dinosaurs replace their teeth throughout their life. So just having a tooth in and around the sediment doesn't necessarily mean it came from the animal. It could have just washed in the depositional event that buried these two animals. So you got to have a broken tooth crown. So tooth crown, the part of the tooth that's visible in the mouth. Broken off tooth crown, either embedded in the bone, pressed to the bone, near the bone, that you can take that tooth crown and match it up to a root in the jaw still. Then you're like, well, at least that gives us an idea that this meat eater bit this animal. As opposed to just a shed tooth crown that was a spitter. It's what we call all these teeth that just fall out of the mouth all the time. We call them spitters. Just a bunch of spitters that just washed into the whole system. We're already there laying on this, and just got washed in. And so with these two specimens, we do have a collection of teeth. I think many of them are washed in. In fact, I think most of them are washed in. I don't know yet whether or not any of those teeth actually belong to the meat eater, but you just got to keep looking.
And is there any, because you called it Tyrannosaur, is there is it Tyrannosaurus Rex? Is it Nanotyrannus? I'm sure that's a big debate.
Oh, that's a huge debate, right? We don't know. We don't know yet. So depends on what paleontologist you ask. It's either going to be juvenile T-Rex, or could be a Nanotyrannus, could be something entirely new. Just got to wait for what the science says, right? Because there are some who say that these smaller tyrannosaurs are nothing more than baby or juvenile T-Rexes. But then there's another group that says T-Rex has its own thing, and then there's smaller, more diminutive tyrannosaurs, one of which being given the name Nanotyrannus. But right now, we don't know.
And like with Triceratops, there's actually two tyrannosaurs now, Macrandus and Rex. Is that a similar thing to Proris and Horridus, or do you think that they were...
Well, that whole multi-species of large tyrannosaur, my opinion, that study wasn't very good and should be revisited. So my opinion, I think there's still only one species of large body tyrannosaur, but I'm also not a tyrannosaur worker, so I could be, could be off base here. But
what would you look for to see if there were two species or versus there not being?
Yeah, right. You got to have anatomical differences. So you got to have enough synapomorphies or shared characters between these two animals, but then you got to have autapomorphies, features that only occur in these two animals. And it's got to be outside the realm of just intraspecific, so within species variation, because every species has variation within its. I mean, look at dogs, look at humans, right? Yeah. We come in so many different shapes and sizes that future scientists looking at a collection of our bones would be like, well, look, you look at someone who had acromegaly and they're a giant, and then you look at someone who didn't and they're like, well, there's two different species, right? We can't do that. We gotta find true morphological differences that will help us distinguish these two animals.
So that's actually an interesting thing with whatever it's called, like the development of it, where like humans, you have dwarfism and giantism with that. Could dinosaurs have encountered that too?
Oh, probably, most likely, yeah. I mean, we see it in the animal kingdom all the time, right? We get animals that have grown up on islands and they have insular dwarfism. And then we have animals that, we have elephants, right? We have normal-sized elephants, African elephants, and then we have island elephants that are smaller, but they're all still elephants. And so it's really trying to figure out, again, these questions that we might not ever have the answer to.
And then you were talking about the similarities and differences of species, how there has to be enough for it to be the same genus or species, but different enough to be something separate. What would those be for Triceratops prorus and Triceratops hortus?
Yeah, right. I mean, overall, gross morphology, they share very similar features. Both have a unfenestrated frill. The epiossifications around that frill, fairly similar. Postcranial skeleton between the two, very similar. So you got to look at some differences within the skeleton. So there are some differences with how the shape of the epinasal, that horn on the nasal bone, is shaped. There are some differences there. There's differences in orientation and shape of the brow horns. There's differences in orientation and shape of the cheeks. So there are shared characters, synapomorphies, that this group has, and then there are features about each animal that make them different. There's also time, right? They are separated, again, depending on who you ask. They are separated by at least 1 million years. That's a long time for mutations and evolution to happen. And so it makes sense that there's two different species.
And you mentioned the nasal horn. I mean, it's debated if Triceratops even fought with its horns sometimes. I think most people think it does, and most people agree that it does. That would be the big two main brow horns. What would the nasal horn be used for?
That's a hot debate as well within horned dinosaur workers, is really what are these horns for? Sure, defense is a hypothesis because they're there. They're a relatively big feature of the skull. But we look at animals today that have antlers or horns and what they use them for, and really it's conspecific combat. So mate competition, right? Deer and elk come together and clash. Bighorn sheep come together and clash, fighting for that mate to be able to, right, pass on your genes and increase your fitness points. So most likely conspecific combat in sort of not necessarily coming together and crashing together like bighorn sheep or the way elk do, but certainly tussling, and there is some evidence that they came together locking horns and kind of pushing each other back and forth. We do have some specimens of ceratopsians that seem to have bone lesions on the cheeks where these horns sort of match up, right? Come together, lock horns, and then the horn tips cause some damage to the bone. So there is evidence for that in the fossil record. But yeah, most likely, got to get the mates.
And I mean, that's kind of all I have for you for right now, at least. But okay. Do you have any questions for me, or just anything final you'd like to say to everybody watching?
No, this has been really fun. Really appreciate all your questions. We covered a wide range of things, and it's great to meet you.
It's great
to have you come to the museum and check it out. Especially today is Acrocanthosaur's birthday, 75 years since that species was named. So kind of a fun day to be at the museum.
Big old lizard,
yeah.
Old vicious lizard.
Yeah.
But it was nice to officially meet you.
Yeah, pleasure.
I'd love to come back someday, and
yeah, please do.
Hopefully with more knowledge than I do now and more questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
But for all of you watching, thank you for tuning in. I'm your host, Eric Crawford. This was Eric Lund. Remember, keep it prehistoric. Goodbye.